Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. You know, one of the perks about having 4 kids that you know about is actually getting a direct line to the big man up north. And this year, he wants you to know the best gift that you can give someone is the gift of Mint Mobile's unlimited wireless for $15 a month. Now, you don't even need to wrap it. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
1, 2, 3. Happy... No, you've all got to come in at the same time.
Oh, right.
You've got other stuff in this script.
There's an intro first of all.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
Happy New Year.
No, it says Naomi.
Oh,
Welcome
yeah.
back to Quiet Riot with me.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm a bit rusty.
Quiet Riot.
Welcome back to Quiet Riot with me, Naomi Smith.
And me, Kenny Campbell.
Et moi, Alexandro.
Happy New Year!
Listeners, we hope you've had a lovely festive break. However you do or don't celebrate, Alex, Kenny and I wanted to record a mini New Year episode for you before we return to the regular rhythm of our Thursday main show and Sunday school.
We're going to be chatting about our overall impressions of 2024 with a side order of what it was like to start a political podcast right in the middle of the year and a little gaze into our crystal balls for what 2025 might have in store for us.
Now, we tried to keep your Quiet Riot stocking filled with fun over the holiday period, with everything from cooking and quizzing to uber-polling geekery and a deep dive into Hallmark Christmas movies. Whoop! And we've not pestered you for cash while doing it.
But it is now time for you and us to plan the year ahead. So we're going to send around a virtual collection tray. We want to grow and improve Quiet Riot, and we cannot do it without your generous help. So if you can afford to bung us a few quid, you can sign up as a monthly backer on ko-fi.com/quietriotpod.
All our main content will remain free at the point of use, just like the NHS. But Ko-Fi backers will get the perks of attending online live Q&A sessions with us and the chance to shape the show at our open editorial meetings. There is one of each planned for the month of January, so sign up now on ko-fi.com/quietriotpod to get your invitation.
And you'll also gain exclusive access to our Discord channel, where you get to chat with like-minded Quiet Rioters, give us feedback, and be the first to hear about new feature shows and guests. You'll get your Discord invite automatically when you sign up to ko-fi.com/quietriotpod.
If you cannot afford to part with cash right now, difficult decisions, black holes and all, you can still help us. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review on whatever app you use for your podcasts. It really helps boost the algorithm. And follow or subscribe. That ensures each episode lands as early as possible on your device.
And speaking of feedback, Alex and Kelly, we have had some, and it has come after our Nigel and Nigella show from a chap called Callum, who writes, "Remember when Nigella said chutney is so easy on your podcast? Well, I've just cored 20 pears and I'd like to beg to differ. I'll be writing in for your January episode, that's for sure."
Thanks for that. Let's get on with the show.
Quiet Riot.
Now, there's far too many news reviews of the year, and if we were to do a blow-by-blow account of the last 12 months, well, it would blow. But I am keen to know what vibe 2024 gave you, what your overall impression of the year was. Kenny, shall we start with you, seeing as you don't get the microphone that often?
Given the way I've been handling tech over the last couple of weeks, it's no flipping wonder I don't get the microphone that often. So I've got, I think, probably 3 takeaways from the last year. Unfortunately, I've got to kick off with the likes of Trump, Putin, Netanyahu, and Musk. And it's a quick one, because that's all the space that they deserve. But it's a reminder that while the pen may be mightier than the sword, for the last year at least, bullets and bombs and billionaires have sadly had them both beaten. The second takeaway from 2024, really, if you think back to the Olympics, do you remember Reagan, the Australian breakdancer,
Yeah.
who bemused the entire Olympic community with her bizarre breakdancing performance? So from Reagan to right now in the Premiership football, Man City languishing in the league, doesn't matter what happens, we are still, as a species, fascinated by heroic failure. And that's probably a good thing, I think.
Well, for those who are the queen of lost causes like me, yeah.
Welcome to my club. And then for my third takeaway, in the middle of the summer in Thailand, there was a pygmy hippo born. And it was called, it was cute as can be, and it took over the internet for a few weeks. It was called Mudeng, which I think translates literally as bouncy pork. So it gets us the prize for the best name of 2024. Tons and tons of memes.
Wow.
But
that was a journey, Kenny.
Did you like that? Well, there's more with that. Bouncy pork, the Thai authorities, if I recall rightly, had a competition to let the public name.
Oh, like Boaty McBoatface.
Exactly that, Boaty McBoatface. And the three options they gave, now let me get this right, the three options they gave the Thai public were bouncy pork, red pork, well, get this one, minced pork.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, I thought Scottish people were hardcore when it came to giving names to public institutions, but naming your zoo pets minced pork, you know, that
especially when it isn't a pig, it's a hippo.
Yeah, well, once it's minced, nobody knows, do they? But the most significant thing that Mudeng did was it was given two cakes. It was given a Kamala Harris cake, and it was given a Donald Trump cake. Yeah. And Mudeng picked Donald Trump, which means that Bouncy Pork did better than so many of the pollsters who we love so much, who all undervalued Trump. Most of them overvalued Stammer. So my third big takeaway is this, and it's a reminder that despite all the talk, nobody knows a damn thing. Naomi, I'm sure you've got a view as well.
Look, the lazy interpretation of 2024 is that incumbents the world over did badly. And it just so happened that in the UK, the incumbents were the right, not the progressive left. And so, you know, that's how we got a Labour victory. But I think that there is a more positive spin to put on my kind of vibe of 2024. That while it is, of course, no exaggeration to say that progressive, centre-left, social democracy, whatever you want to call it, is struggling all over the world, not least the USA, not least in Germany. But there are shafts of light. And it's not just the fact that our parliament saw a return of a record number of progressive MPs from Labour, Lib Dems and Greens. But remember in France, they had a version of a progressive alliance that is called the New Popular Front. And it really quickly and decisively came together to defeat the populist right. Now, whether it will hold and continue to do that next year is another thing. But I think that we can take from it that when the left, centre-left, progressive movement get their act together and work together, as we did see happen here in the UK, not officially under an umbrella name like the New Popular Front, but with Labour and the Lib Dems aggressively targeting their own seats and leaving each other's target seats alone. And to an extent, they left the Greens alone and therefore key victory seats as well. Then we win. And it does work, and it can happen, and it must happen, and it's going to happen given what is coming down the line, particularly with Reform UK. So my vibe from 2024 is that when the left do get their act together, and they did not in the US, they can win, and they do win. Alex, come on, you've always got a view.
So I did an interview with Richard Watson, and that's out in 2 days' time, and I would urge you to look out for that. Now, he is one of the world's most noted futurologists. And I know that sounds like a sort of mystic art, but it's much more science than art. These people get paid a huge amount of money by big companies to do basically scenario planning, risk assessment, and things like that.
They should hire Porky Mince or whatever he's called.
And Porky Mince, happy veganuary, everyone. And one of the bottom lines was that what appears like acceleration may just be a period of volatility, and they do come around often. 1900 to 1950 was actually a period of much more fundamental innovation. You know, what's followed has been tweaking, really. We didn't invent the car, we just sort of made it electric and self-driving. We didn't invent the airplane, we just improved it massively. There's a whole series of things that we have advanced hugely, but were invented in that first 50 years of the last century.
Evolution, not revolution, if you like.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then 1950 to 2000, what was fundamentally changing in that was social mores. So it was a really profound social rejigging that went on around the world. That is what changed in that period. And so it got me thinking, what will characterize 2000 to 2050? We are about to enter the exact midpoint of that quinquennium, which I know is quite frightening, actually, to think about.
I know.
And judging from this year, I would say that the thing that will define this era is the realization that the reaction to progress is not an attempt to hold still or remain the same, which is the traditional definition of conservatism, but an active attempt to reverse progress. And I think that is something that had not really dawned on a lot of people. I think we may have misunderstood Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s aphorism, you know, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, because he was describing the effect of a battle, of a struggle that was constantly going on. He was saying that we can't allow setbacks to defeat us.
No.
He was not describing some axiomatic force of nature like gravity that will do its thing whether you put your shoulder to the wheel or not.
No, I think
too many people for too long have understood it as the latter. We have become, I think, quite flabby in our thinking that I can do nothing and things will broadly get better.
Improve.
And it is time to refocus. And I think this will be the year where we either do that or fail to do that.
Quiet Riot.
Halfway through 2024, the three of us decided to launch a political podcast. I don't think any of us expected our timing to be quite so perfect, given the Sunak early election announcement that coincided perfectly with our first episode, nor for the show to do as well as it is doing. Thank you all very much once again. I think we achieved the listener figures we thought would take a year in about 4 months, if not less. So, you two, as the regular voices of Quiet Riot, give the listeners some juicy juice. What's it really been like?
Listen, I think, well, the first thing to say is that we actually decided in January, almost exactly a year ago, to do this. And we recorded our sort of internal pilot a year. I mean, we're out 3 days a year from the anniversary we recorded that pilot. And then there was a lot of work behind the scenes to sort of get all our ducks in a row in order to launch the actual thing. For me, it has been the rediscovery that hard work can be quite a lot of fun, because I think I'd lost sight of that a little bit, that, you know, if you're proud of what you're doing and enjoying what you're doing, then the many hours and all-nighters are much easier to accommodate. So I guess for me, it's been to rediscover that underneath all the anger that I was holding on to about the state of the world, there was still quite a lot of humor. We're ultimately, I think, philosophical beings and quite fun people. And so, I was watching The Importance of Being Earnest over the holiday break, and it reminded me of the thing Oscar Wilde said, which is, you have to treat the serious thing with frivolity and the frivolous thing very, very seriously. And I think that's been the watchword. And
Oh, for sure.
I hope that people can hear that in our interactions and the way we sort of fit around each other. And I think we increasingly fit better and better around each other. We have found a
Rhythm.
kind of language and a rhythm of our own. And it's now quite a fun dance to do every week.
Oh, well, I've worked with both of you separately from podcasting. So for listeners who don't know, Kenny was the director of comms at Best for Britain for a few years, and then Alex and I had been working at Best for Britain on social media stuff for years and years. And Alex and I obviously had separately also worked on previous podcasts. And so to get back to working with you both has just been a joy, because it was like putting on an old shoe. We
That's
know
the best
each other.
description of me ever. I'm an old boot.
And you look it.
and you're a comfy Ugg slipper, Alex.
Thank you. Are you calling me fat again? Jesus.
I'm not the one that calls you that.
You're a bit furry.
But it's just been so easy because we know each other so well, and that, when, as you say, you've got the all-nighters and the stressful moments, that elasticity in a relationship gets you through, when you know you can bend and flex and take a bit of, bad temper from one another because you're stressed and tired, and you know that that's why they're reacting that way. It just means there is very room for any brittleness in what we do. And we do love each other, and that warmth and that opportunity to kick around an idea with people who you respect and who get you is a huge privilege. And I think towards the end of our time doing other shows, we missed each other. We weren't being put on the same shows as each other often enough, and I really missed A, podcasting, and B, podcasting with people who I know really well, because then it doesn't feel like work, and it just feels like doing a thing that you want to do and probably would be doing over a cup of coffee anyway. You're just hitting the record button while doing it. So I've loved every second of it, but it is exhausting, and doing it on top of my full-time job and some board responsibilities that I have for a charity that I sit on does mean I've taken on a huge amount this year. But I think busy people get more done, and I do think if you want something doing, you should ask a busy person. And I've just loved it. So thank you both, and thank you very much to our listeners, because it really has been a joy.
And it has got scrappy on occasion. And I think one of the aspects of this sort of tripod that I really do appreciate, and I think it is actually really rare, is that all three of us have been willing to proactively apologize when we've been having a bad day. And there is a sort of safety in that relationship that you don't get from people who either hold on to grudges. It's actually a really rare quality.
It is.
To have people willing to say, do you know what, I was out of order.
And that's one of the things about a tripod. I mean, a tripod is the most stable support that you can have. But equally, sticking three people in a relationship of any sort together runs the huge risk that you got to...
Two's company.
Exactly that. And three is a punch in the chops. And I don't think it's accidental. We all come with different sort of backgrounds and different experiences, professional and personal, to plug into everything. But the support network is always there. And it's probably not something that the listeners are aware of. It's one of these things that happens quietly in the background, but makes the difference between a project like this succeeding or crashing and burning.
And I think the support network goes so much further than the three of us. And the other thing that's been so beautiful about it has been how many of our friends have wanted to guest on the show, how many of our contacts and, people that we've worked with in the past have been chomping at the bit to help us succeed and give their time to us. We pay them, don't get me wrong. We are not a stingy employer by any stretch of the imagination, but that has been wonderful. And that having all of them rooting for us as well and pushing our content and telling us that we've been doing a great job has been wonderfully comforting, because as much as we were experienced podcasters, we'd never done it on our own before, and branching out on your own and delivering on your own does require people telling you, people who you trust, whether you've done a good job or not, or whether things need to change. So we've been really very, very lucky with the support of all of that, and of course everyone who's tuned in.
Well, with that in mind, because I'm a relative podcast outsider to you two, you both have podcasted before, and I'm almost, but not quite a podcast virgin. But my biggest takeaway, I think, from the last few months on the show has been that every time that I interact with the show's fantastic fans, and hello to all of you out there, it always feels like I've walked into either Naomi or Alex's front room and been introduced to the families, which is an absolutely lovely thing. But it's also as intimidating as hell. Like, I imagine it's how dogs feel when they're introduced to new people. So if you ever meet me out there in podcast land, that's why I've taken to sort of wagging my tail, doing tricks for treats and barking really slowly so that people can understand my Scottish accent.
That's quite a confusing image, to be honest.
And Will Overman will be along shortly with Penny and Ridley mashup. Quiet Riot. As we head into 2025, I want to know, Alex and Kenny, what your hopes, dreams, predictions, or resolutions are going to be. And can you go as macro as you want, as micro as you want, global, local? I'd love to know kind of everything that's in your head about where you think the next year is going to take us. And I'm going to throw in an extra one because, you can get as zany as you like with this one. The meme kind of phrase, well, I didn't have XYZ on my 2024 bingo card. Can you think about what any one of those things might be for 2025? Like, none of us had South Korea martial law debacle on our 2024 card, and we certainly didn't have, I think, the rebels in Syria taking Damascus in under 3 days.
In fairness, I have the feeling that the president of South Korea didn't have that on his bingo card until 2 days before deciding to have a go.
Fair enough. But yeah, go on, Alex. I think you've probably got some expectations, particularly from the US.
Yeah, I have to say, even though I predicted that the sort of Musk-Trump relationship would fall apart quite spectacularly, even I envisaged it just after inauguration. I didn't think the sort of MAGA versus Musk battle would start in earnest a month before they were in power. What is going on at the moment is really utterly extraordinary.
It is.
And what is extraordinary about it, and we will do a special episode on this where we chat to someone about the way Musk has fallen out with basically the Twitter MAGA base. What's extraordinary about it is that I genuinely think there isn't another person in the world that could damage Trump in earnest other than Musk. But Musk is in a position where, A, he has his own subcult. So if Trump designated Musk a traitor and not part of the MAGA movement and said what he usually says, I don't really know him that well and we weren't that closely associated, which is what he tends to do, I don't think that would wash with everyone. Musk occupies quite a genuinely unique position. I think he could, if Musk turned around and said, Trump is actually part of the establishment, he's part of the problem, and he's condual, including me, I think that would do significant damage to the MAGA project. I'm not saying a majority would peel off and follow Musk, but I think enough people would to properly damage that
Yeah.
section of the right. And it seems extraordinary because this was something that was obvious and known. It's extraordinary that Trump let Musk into his inner circle,
Yeah.
knowing how volatile a personality he is, what a big ego he is, how in an alpha way he would try to establish his way as the big,
How he'd back the
self as the
Dems
big player.
before.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, the whole thing, it said trouble from the start.
Yeah.
And Trump he's not intelligent in the way I would see intelligence, but he's got street smarts.
Yeah. Low cunning.
He doesn't make massive strategic errors like this very often. And this was a big one. And I think it will fall apart quite well. It is already falling apart quite spectacularly.
It is. It's been delicious to watch. And the Laura Loomer takedown of Musk and his response has just sort of been, keeping me munching popcorn all festive period. I think big tech enjoying cozy access is going to continue. And I think it's going to continue not just in Washington, but other G7 capitals as well. And I think we'll end up kind of crossing every conflict of interest boundary that governance experts have ever come up with.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's about like the corruption of kickbacks. I think what we're going to be seeing is like a plundering and state capture of sectors of the economy by big tech. I mean, just look at NASA. They're not trusting Boeing to get astronauts back from space and rescue them. They're asking Musk to do it. And I think that if it goes too far, people will kick back big time against it. I think there will be a backlash to this kind of unhampered power.
I think that's perceptive, but it's part of an even wider lesson. And I find it very difficult not to draw parallels with the Johnson-Cummings relationship, but also Brexit more generally. You see, I got there first today, Naomi.
Yay, well done.
Because I think the wider lesson is that if you kind of con a mandate on very empty, broad rhetoric, you then have to fill that void and fill it quickly. And if there's no consensus as to what life looks like after the point you get the mandate, and you've got a lot of big egos with very different ideas as to what should fill that void, that becomes a massive problem very, very quickly.
I completely agree with you. Like, despite his claims of a sweeping popular majority, remember, he won 1.5% lead in the popular vote.
Yeah.
That is slim. That is really slim. And his vote wasn't so much up as Harris's was down. And it was the cost of living. It was grocery and gas prices that kept, Democrat voters home. And there are just some universal lessons about that kind of consolidation of power. If Trump won an inflation election, not the MAGA election he is claiming, then I think if he goes through with these tariff threats, you're going to see consumer prices going up.
Yeah.
And then when you combine that with like the Health Secretary Robert Kennedy's war against American pharmaceuticals, that's going to like depress rural incomes. And both of those are going to hit his political base. So 2025 could be a really difficult year for Donald Trump.
So again, the parallel with Brexit, this cakeism. You can sell to people that you can have your cake and eat it, and everything is dandy until you get into power, because then people will demand cake.
Do you deliver?
And it's not deliverable.
The great thing about Trump from Trump's perspective, though, and Musk from Musk's perspective, and indeed Putin from his own perspective, is they don't really have to give a damn what all the rest of us think. This is Trump's last term. He can throw all the rules out. He can burn the books. He can do whatever he wants. This is his last moment to shine and be selfish. And I think my take or my anticipation for this year is that the power play between Trump, Musk, and Putin is going to be fascinating. The world's three most powerful narcissists feeding off one another, all of them experts at making money off other people's ideas and hard work. And the optimist in me sees Ukraine, for example, forced to accept some sort of deal that at least stops the bombing. Then the rebuilding starts, and that rebuilding will involve eye-watering sums from all manner of sources and obscene opportunities for the most opportunistic and well-connected players. If there's one part of the world where I think there's a huge amount of money to be made over the next few years, Ukraine is where it's at. And that's a sort of opportunity where I can see Trump, Musk, and Putin doing all sorts of dances for their own interests, of course.
So you asked for an out there prediction.
Yeah,
Naomi.
come
Go
on
on
then.
then.
So,
Yeah.
and it's interesting that you should mention Putin, Kenny. I think Putin will fall this year. I think that precisely that interplay that you described is actually quite dangerous for him. And looking at Syria, what happened in Syria, forces that are made to defend a regime, in Russia's case, with huge loss of life in Ukraine, they're signed up to that regime out of fear, not out of loyalty or belief. So when power begins to ebb away, it ebbs away at a rate of knots.
A torrent.
Yeah.
And I have the feeling that the situation this year with Trump pressing for some sort of deal with Ukraine, Musk having his own interests over there, China having their own interests over there, Russia's really only very strong ally in the Middle East collapsing, and Turkey looking quite ambivalent, I think the situation is much more precarious for Putin than most people credit. And it really could be the year where, in the space of a week, he goes.
Don't tease me with a good time.
No, seriously, that
Yeah.
is my, like I said, it's an out there prediction. So I'm not rating it as any more than vaguely possible. But I do think it's vaguely possible. And if you'd asked me a year ago, I wouldn't have said that.
Good take.
So, Naomi, what about yours? You must have something in mind.
I do. I mean, I don't know that I have the, thing on my bingo card necessarily. I think globally we are in for a very, very bumpy ride because we currently have, I think, over 55 live conflicts in the world at the moment, the highest number since the Second World War. And I think Putin and Trump wannabes the world over, some perhaps even more opportunistic than Trump, will read uncertainty as vacuum and a license to take a pop at a neighbor. So I think globally we may be distracted beyond Middle East and Ukraine to things further afield. And I think it's just worth remembering, and going back to what we were talking about with the Trump MAGA versus inflation election, ordinary people with almost no personal savings are feeling insecure. And that is why they are feeling bad about prices and migration. 27% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings, and half of US households couldn't manage an unexpected expense of $1,000.
Which in a country without universal health
exactly.
care
That's right.
is catastrophic, right?
Is exactly right, Alex. And so, I think that public debt is the probable grim reaper, but a wider failure to find solutions to this kind of insecurity and impoverished feeling that people have, particularly in their base, is going to catch up with them in time. And you could even see the stock markets and big business boosters deserting the Republican movement when the real economy tanks. Because obviously it has been doing incredibly well for the last decade or so, but that hasn't trickled down. So I just hope that Labour are listening and watching and doing something about that here so that they don't suffer the same fate.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because conversely, the situation with private debt in the UK is actually slightly better than it has been for a very long time.
From a very terrifying...
I know, but the point is, even though we get these news of lack of business confidence, lack of consumer confidence, etc., they're not reflected in the spending. Like, there was record footfall, loads of people took holidays, and I have the feeling that actually the economy in the UK will bounce back much better than most expect. Because it's strong in its fundamentals, and that includes actually its major companies that drive the share and stock market. And I think a lot has been said about the mistakes made in the budget, but actually the pension consolidation in the budget is absolutely the right thing to do and will be a key in investment. And just to emphasize something I've said many, many times that people find very difficult to grasp, investment is a market in itself.
Yep.
There is money sloshing around right now looking for a place to make a return. And all this instability in the United States, in France, in Germany, actually may be bad in all sorts of ways, but it does push investment towards calmer ports. And I have the feeling we will see the UK economy do quite a bit better this year than most are predicting.
Well, I hope so. And to be the second one to ring the Brexit klaxon on this show, we do, of course, have the big reset happening this year in the run-up to the official review of the Brexit deal with the EU in early 2026. So we will see some meat on the bones, I hope, quite early on this year as to what that is going to look like. Now, that may well be happening against the backdrop of tariffs being imposed on us, but certainly China and the EU by Trump. And you're not wrong to suggest that actually the UK could be a bit of a recipient from services with regards to that, because we don't really export much in the way of goods to the US by comparison to, say, Germany. So I think we probably would see a slight boost in services, but overall nothing would boost the UK economy more than aligning with Europe and together being able to fend off tariff imposition and friction with trade that Trump does bring in. And I think both Brussels and London are acutely aware of that.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty hopeful that we might see something more significant than some of the stuff that's been mooted around veterinary agreements coming from those talks as they progress into the new year.
Okay, finally, Kenny, stick your neck out.
Stick my neck out. Well, I've already said what I think about what Musk, Trump and Putin are going to do. In the UK, just to sort of stick with the domestic feel then, regardless of what happens with the economy, and I think regardless of what happens with Trump as well, the UK is definitely, from a political perspective, going to swing even further right this year. It's tarried briefly with Labour, and it's going to go the other way. Labour's obviously picked fights with farmers, with pensioners, with small businesses, with people who don't want housing estates thrown up where they walk their dogs, but of course it's struggled to make any friends, and its messaging has been really very poor over the last few months. And unless we forget, Reeves and Starmer spent the opening weeks of their reign telling us how tough things were going to get. So I think the best that they can hope for, of course, is a couple of years of a very unhappy electorate, fueled by a media that simply can't believe the headlines that Labour will be serving up, and an economy that I think is praying for an external shock of some sort to kick things back into action. So if you think things are a bit right-wing now, I think it's a case of just wait. And in terms of a crazy-ass prediction, well, on that front, actually, Clarkson stands for election. There you go. Don't know who he stands for because he represents the Conservative Party right now, but who knows? Can anybody top Clarkson standing for election?
Yeah, in terms of bleakness, I think not. Right, so that's all we have time for on this inaugural episode of 2025. You may have noticed that it's now season 2, episode 1 of Quiet Riot. We thought it wise to reset the clock. Thank you so much for tuning in today and into all our festive content for the past few weeks. We hope you've enjoyed it all.
And we couldn't do any of it without you. So a huge, big thank you from me too. And a reminder to follow us on socials at Quiet Riot Pod. And if you want to email, you can do so on quietriotpod@gmail.com.
So as one year ends and another begins, please make it one of your resolutions to get a friend addicted to Quiet Riot too. Just like Starmer, our main mission this year is growth.
We'll be back again very soon. Keep on rioting quietly and know that we love you lots.
Happy New Year and goodbye for now.
See ya!
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreou and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sanguita, artwork by Simona Canelu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global. Quiet Riot. Has someone just fallen off their chair?
Almost, but not quite. I've got to remember not to move.
Is that still the creaky chair?
It's the creaky chair, and the reason it's a creaky chair is because it turns out, essentially, it's a skip chair. So that's why I cannot move. I've literally, once I'm locked in and we've started recording properly.
So my mum told me the story that somebody had put a washing machine outside in the hope that someone would take it. It wasn't broken or anything. It was just they were upgrading to a new one. And a couple of days, no one took it. And her husband stuck a note on it saying £5, inquire within, and it had been nicked within about 10 seconds.
That's brilliant.